I'm Fleeta Solomon from Little Green Pharma, and I'm the CEO.
I'm Barb Fullerton from Little Green Pharma, and I'm Head of Sales and Distribution.
Alistair Warren from Little Green Pharma and General Counsel.
Thank you all, and also for your very helpful submission to the inquiry. We've all read it. Do you have an opening statement to make?
Little Green Pharma was the first company in Australia to produce locally grown medicines, and we're really proud of that, to have not only Australians but also the rest of the world who are benefiting from our WA cannabis medicine. So that's a huge thrill for us. In the driving space, so this includes enhancements to WA road rules to put medicinal cannabis on the same footing as other pharmaceutical medications and ensure patients are able to access the treatments most suitable for their particular condition. The access space to ensure WA patients obtain the medications that they need in an efficient, timely, cost-effective way. The treatment space by ensuring practitioners can ensure their patients get the product that they are prescribed. The production space by pushing WA on an equal footing with our eastern states counterparts to ensure patient access to cost-effective medications. And finally, the manufacture and quality space by ensuring WA patients can access pharmaceutical-grade medical cannabis products produced to Australian pharmaceutical standards. So our recent submission reflects these changes that we genuinely believe can optimise the outcomes for our patients, particularly in that access and quality space. And really, we believe that WA can actually lead this industry. We tend to follow the eastern states, particularly New South Wales and Queensland, and with a couple of really simple and easy changes that we believe can be made, WA can even lead the way. So thank you for having us today.
You add that the regulatory approach in WA compared with other states and territories has been excessively conservative. Could you expand on those, please?
Thank you. Yes, we believe that there are a number of patient access barriers, and we have outlined those in the submission, which are just different to the other states. Each one, and perhaps I can touch on each of them briefly. The first one is the state health approval for individual patients. So at the moment, there is a dual approval pathway for SASB approvals. So there's a federal and a state that is currently required at the moment. And this is different to the other states, particularly Queensland and New South Wales, whereby they just have the one federal access approval. So that's the first one, and that we believe that could be a very simple change. The second one is the state health approval. Again, it's a dual process for authorised prescriber applications. Again, at the moment, they need federal and they need state approval. And WA is the only state that has this in place. So we believe, again, that could be a very simple change. Both of those 2 points that I've mentioned, just a burdensome cause delays, and it's just unnecessary in our opinion and also the opinion of many doctors and patients. There is another barrier, the 30 milligram THC daily limit that is currently enforced by WA Health. This contrasts with the current TGA approval limit, which is actually uncapped. We've mentioned in there it was 100 milligrams. We generally believe that it's actually updated to not capped. Final two, particularly the interstate dispensing limitations. This one is WA is the only state with this, and currently a WA pharmacy can only dispense a Schedule 8 medicine with a script from a WA practitioner. So we pharmacists here cannot dispense scripts interstate, and yet over east, at Eastern States, pharmacy can prescribe here, for example.
The Deputy Commissioner yesterday was telling us that their main concern is impaired drivers. Their legislation requires that THC being present would indicate impairment. That's the current legislation. Yep. But their focus actually is, from his own words, was actually on detecting impairment. But the question was, how do you detect impairment in a way which is probably standardizable, which is probably recognizable in a court system? Is there any method, any standards there? The roadside testing is one, but any other apparatus or quantitative measures that you're aware of?
In Canada, there are some, they do have some blood test limits. I don't have that information in front of me at the moment, but those models do exist. It's also important to note that when we're talking about cannabis medication, the two active ingredients are cannabidiol and tetrahydrocannabinol, so THC and CBD. When you have THC and CBD together, CBD actually basically reverses the psychoactive effects of THC for many patients. So just because you have THC doesn't mean that someone feels impaired. So that's important to note. It also is important to note that as patients are on it for a longer time, they have a tolerance that develops in terms of feeling impaired or high or euphoric, and that settles over time. And the reality is medical cannabis will typically last, if it's taken in an oral form, up to 8 hours, but it'll still be detectable the next day in a blood, or even potentially a week later. So if someone's in an accident but hasn't taken it for 10 days or more, it could still be in the system. So it's adversely affecting the patient.
And then removing hurdles that unfairly burden WA producers compared to eastern states. Can we hear some more about that, please?
Is that Schedule 8 only applies to cannabis that's cultivated, produced or imported in WA when that cannabis has been packed in containers in finished form. So the significance of this interpretation is that cannabis in all its preceding forms, so seeds, seedlings, plants, mother plants, harvested crops, drying crops, cured crops, are all cannabis, and cannabis extracts are considered a Schedule 9 in Western Australia. Now, this, if you can imagine, this is the same schedule as LSD and DMT and heroin. And WA, we believe, is perhaps the only state that has this as Schedule 9. And the regulatory burden, the administrative oversight that's required, and the quite prohibitive costs for our business and any other producers concerning the Schedule 9 is something that we really would prefer to be changed in line.
So we have 20 or so cultivars in our operation, and we have to keep separate Schedule 9 records for every single one of those cultivars at every single stage of its production throughout the process, which has to run in parallel to our actual operational recording requirements. So everything up to the point at which it's in a bottle, effectively, is considered a Schedule 9, from all the way from seed through to seedling. The Schedule 9 scheduling is identical across all states and territories. It's just the interpretation that the State Health Department take of actually 3 words in that scheduling entry that result in this finding around how they schedule cannabis in Western Australia. So every other state's interpreted it in one particular way, and State Health has interpreted it in another particular way.
Just to give you an example, so we're growing plants, obviously. So anytime through that growth cycle, we have to regularly de-leaf, so to allow for airflow, light flow through the plant. So because the flowers we're growing, we want to have equal coverage. So every time they take a leaf off, that needs to be weighed and recorded in a drug register.
And we have thousands of
Every
plants.
leaf.
So you're doing an agricultural process, as in growing a plant, and you de-leaf. I know about de-leafing. We do it in the wine industry.
Yeah. So that every little piece they take off, if something snaps off, they need to go and weigh it and record it. So you can imagine we've got how many grow rooms down south now? 9. And we've got how many staff that are in there every day?
Yeah, up to 30 staff, which are additionally a requirement for this very factor.
So I just want to get some clarity around what you're saying is the West Australian Health interpretation.
Sure.
How are they communicating that to you?
We've had several conversations and emails around it. It really comes back to the interpretations of the words when prepared or packed for human consumption. And
where are those words?
So that's in the Schedule 9 entry for cannabis, generally. And so when prepared or packed, they've taken the view that means at a point in time when that happens. Other states have taken the view that means when the cannabis is intended to be prepared or packed for human consumption at some point in its life cycle, that will be a Schedule 8 from that point onwards. So it's really that question of how you define when, what when means in that circumstance. The State Health take the view that it's the point at which it's in the bottle. Everyone else takes the view that says when you're packing cannabis, when you're producing cannabis for human consumption, it's a Schedule 8. If you're producing it for some other purpose, it'll be a Schedule 9.
You also mentioned, this is the last of the regulatory reforms you're thinking of, guaranteeing practitioner rights to control the treatment of their patients and also treating medical cannabis the same as other pharmaceuticals.
So this, we believe, is a patient safety issue that has arisen following the recent changes at the federal level, which have operated to confuse prescribing rules across the states and territories. The TGA has, we believe, overstepped its jurisdiction by encouraging prescribers to adopt an active ingredient prescribing model for unapproved medications. And this permits the substitution of medically prescribed cannabis products by pharmacies. So this contradicts a coordinated federal guidance concerning the prescription of unapproved products, which clearly require unapproved medicines to be prescribed on a named, non-substitutional basis, as well as operating to impose on state and territory statutory prescribing authorities. What this does, because it's generic prescribing then, it gives power to pharmacies to substitute to what they believe in a category with another unregistered medicine. And the issue here is that there is potential liability for our prescribers in WA and in other states for permitting this substitution of unapproved medicines, which have not been demonstrated to be bioequivalent. So it goes against what the TGA actually states is when a medicine is unapproved, you cannot substitute. It's an unregistered medicine. You cannot substitute a generic when you haven't got studies done on bioequivalence. So, for example, if a doctor prescribes a patient with an oil medicine, it's a 10-10, so equal parts CBD, equal parts THC, and goes into a pharmacy, right now pharmacists can change that to something different and something with different excipients in the medicine. And so the patient could be allergic, for example, to even if one product has got sunflower oil as opposed to MCT oil, the patient doesn't know this, and if they have an allergic reaction to sunflower oil, then they're not going to know until they've been prescribed. So this is actually really dangerous for the patient, and yet the TGA has this oversight and has not recognised that this is an issue. So they've contradicted their own concerns when it comes to unregistered medicines. So this is a difficult one because it is at a federal level. But in the circumstances, we would recommend WA explicitly clarify that prescribed, unapproved medicinal cannabis products must be named and cannot be substituted with anything else unless there's been consultation with the treating practitioner. Otherwise, we're just giving power to pharmacists. Could be getting in very cheap product, non-GMP product from other parts of the world that we don't even recognise and are aware of. So it's a huge quality issue. Patients in WA are circumventing the WA system and actually going interstate. And then there's another problem because the interstate pharmacies can send their scripts here to WA, but of course the WA pharmacists can't send their scripts over east. However, what happens if somebody is requiring more THC and they can't access it in WA? Clearly they go interstate, but that doesn't benefit our medical practitioners nor WA state health because there is no monitoring in place and then there is no record of what patients are consuming. We have a significant amount of data that basically assumes its safety and that it's relatively efficacious, and that's why it's allowed through the SASB pathways because of its history. When you look at new modes of delivery, which is including cannabis capsules or even patches or other delivery methods that perhaps everybody would see as a preferred pharmaceutical, me included, it takes a lot longer because you've got to go through these clinical studies that cost more than the $2 or $3 million that we're talking. We're talking a lot more than that and many more years in terms of the research and the clinical trials, phase 1, 2 and 3, which we have to undergo. That is happening in the background. So the future of medicinal cannabis will be different delivery methods. But at this point in time, because cannabis was used illicitly for so many years in both the flower and the oil forms, that's why most medications prescribed are in that format at the moment. I will note that the difference between the two, the oil, which is taken orally, generally has a longer onset time and lasts for longer, suits different patients. When you vape medicinal cannabis flower, the onset, so for example with pain, can be greatly increased and almost gives you an immediate relief. And so there is a place and a role to play for both of those products. But again, we're very limited in how we can advertise or promote these educational seminars, and that's because it is an unregistered medicine. So it is quite restrictive in Australia, what we can do. However, doctors, really this is a patient-driven industry, and as more patients go to their doctors and ask them if they are suitable, generally then the doctors actually reach out to groups such as Little Green Pharma and other organisations to say, can you help me? I'd like to understand more. And we now have thousands of doctors across Australia who are prescribing cannabinoid therapy, and it is increasing.